All right, a quick detour here in the latest Pats Interference podcast, recorded midday Thursday. About 60 hours, if my math is right, since the Celtics won the title. I was there, wrote about it, incredible experience. We might do story time another time on the podcast, because right now we have Brian Barrett from The Ringer on, who I thought was a perfect combination to, we're going to talk Celtics. I'm not going to do story time altogether. But look, there's another championship in Boston. The parade is tomorrow. You are going to see your favorite athletes drunk, drinking, dancing, hugging, and this is what it's all about. So we will dive into the Patriots. We have forgotten Patriots that we're going to highlight today. Players we think could change the upcoming season. But look, the history of Boston sports just changed on Monday, and you watched it, you covered it, you broke it down, you do what you do, diving further than everybody else is into the numbers. And what I want to know, though, Brian, is not just like, hey, Monday was fun. Tuesday we talked about it. Wednesday we wrote, talked more about it. Thursday today, what do you appreciate about the Celtics run more than you did in the moment and immediately after, just with the perspective of more space and more time?
Yeah, and before I get to that, I am interested to see at the parade who is the Gronk of the parade, or like the Brady in Tampa, where Brady was just like inebriated, right? That's who I want to see. Who's the guy that's going to celebrate the championship the most? So I am interested on that.
It's going to be KP, right? Well, let's talk.
Good point. Yeah,
your old friends at FanDuel, your current friends at FanDuel, not sponsoring the podcast anymore. We're not upset about it. What would your odds be? Like the top three guys? KP is number one.
I think KP is going to be minus money. Minus
yeah,
minus 110. He was having himself a good time the other day. I thought it was hilarious how small the Miller Lite bottle can looked in his hand. It's like you just realize how big. It's not like he's the only big guy on the team, but he's a legitimate giant. And he just like, the thing I loved about Porzingis is he was just so happy all the time being a Celtic. And then he took it to the next level with those. And I know you were in the arena for a bunch of for both or all three of these, the WWE thing where they're showing him like entering the tunnel. I still don't understand, why does he come out later than anybody else? Like, how did that just randomly become a thing? Did it just happen that one game he was coming out late, so they showed him like behind, like in the tunnel? So he said, hey, let's just do this for the rest of the series.
I have no idea. And for people who haven't been or don't know what we're talking about, the Celtics come out 10, 12 minutes, whatever it is, before the game. You go through layup lines, shoot around, you're in your warm-ups, national anthem, intros, and you go. What Porzingis does is lets everyone go out ahead of him. And I'd seen this in game one when he came back in the finals and obviously had that great game and they win. They go out, a couple minutes go by. He's been cleared to play. Everyone knows, but he's still not there. And then he comes out separately, and they had a camera on him that put him walking in the tunnel up on the Jumbotron. So you hear this roar, usually reserved for game-winning buckets, buzzer beaters before the half. And no, it's just a giant man walking through a hallway, then into the tunnel and then out, like you're talking this WWE style. I don't know how it got started, to be frank. My retirement as a Celtics beat writer is coming up tomorrow with the parade. But I loved it, and I wish he would. I hope he did it like against Charlotte on a Monday, because the place went nuts. And you know what? If you get your chance, like, sure, take it. And so I will say this. So long as everyone else in the team with it is cool with it, which they all love Porzingis. So that's fine by me, because otherwise you kind of look like, an attention bleep. But anyway, that's as far as I can tell.
Yeah, that was amazing. I really enjoyed that. But in terms of something that's more appreciated, at least for me over the past couple of days, it's Al Horford, and not like this whole idea of, we heard Tatum say he's his favorite teammate of all time. Joe Mazzulla recently was on Zach Lowe's podcast and said last year he felt like he let Al down, right? So we know about like the great leadership and him being this all-time great teammate. But to me, I think sort of like an under the radar part about this whole run is like how good Al was. Al was unbelievable, right? He was just in his 37-year-old season. So he played in the finals at 38. He guarded the third most isolation possessions in the entire postseason. And guys shot 16 of 43 against him, 37.2%, and less than a point per possession, 0.80, which is still really good numbers. Not Al from 2 years ago, but still really good. He had 7 threes in a game against Indiana when they said, hey, our defense has to be, let's let Al shoot, right? Because we can't really stop the rest of these guys, and Al made them pay. The Cavs closeout game, he has 22 and 15. And we got so caught up, myself at times too, being like, oh, this drop coverage and Al getting switched on Donovan Mitchell at first and then Darius Garland. Like, is this the right strategy? Well, the numbers indicate that it was fine. Like, over time, those numbers worked out. And if you look at it with Al on the court in the Cleveland series, Their 122.4 offensive rating, which would have been the best in the league, 104 defensive rating, which would have been the best in the league. They outscored teams by more than 18 points per 100, or the Cavs. With Al off the court, they had a 107.6 offensive rating, same as Portland, who ranked 29th, and their defensive rating would have been the worst in the NBA with him off the court. So you look back and we talk about, and by the way, Cleveland, they outscored the Cavs by 58 with Al on the court. They were outscored by 22 with Al off the court, I should say. And on the court, they outscored the Cavs by 58, minus 22 off. So he was the only Celtic in the negative when he was off the court. So it just goes to show you, like, we valued his leadership, being a professional, helping guide these guys. But the reality is he's just still a really, really good basketball player at this age. Like, the championship is not over at this point if you don't have Al Horford because of the Porzingis injury. The guy was tremendous.
So if you've never listened to Off the Pike with Brian Barrett on The Ringer, that's exactly what you're getting. Snorting statistics for like 2 minutes straight, mainlining all of the real info that you need. Listen to the podcast, get smarter, and hear things you will not hear other places. I will add this, though, because the Horford point is a great one. Not only that just the Celtics lose arguably their third best, worst, fourth best player on their team for virtually the entire playoffs, meaning Porzingis, and he steps in and provides better than replacement level play. It's that the Mavs strategy was, of course, find the 38-year-old dude, drag him into the pick and roll, sometimes the double drag, get him isolated on Luka and Kyrie, step back, and watch them cook. And at least in game one, because I know Chris Forsberg does a lot of similar tracking numbers, this was Al on Luka Doncic. Luka shot 1 of 8, 0-4 from 3, a block, and had 2 points. The Mavs shot 26% versus Horford overall. He contested a team-high 13 shots and had 3 deflections. So point being, he still got it. And he did it against Kyrie, forced a missed shot at the end of game 3, all these different things. So I'm glad you brought him up. He's at a Raising Cane's also today on Boylston for some reason. He got some hot chicken. So still the only barbecue chicken he's been around, right? Because it was never him, never cooked. He cooked on defense. What hasn't been said?
I guarantee he's not eating any of it either. He's too healthy to do that.
Yeah, okay. For the people still starving for Patriots content, here's your little mention before we do 2 Celtics questions and then move on. He connected with Brady and Alex Guerrero. I want to say a few years ago, somebody wrote about this. I wish I could give them credit and remembered. But to find out how to sustain, right? To like keep his body in shape. So there's a little Patriots for it. What hasn't been said, though, post-finals coverage? Because there's always a lot of receipt dangling and pulling them out. And the social team for whatever team wins the whole thing does this, cut up of everyone who doubted us, yada, yada. And so for some reason, there were people that doubted a 64-win basketball team with 5 all-stars, one-time all-stars in the starting lineup. But aside from that stuff, what hasn't been said?
Yeah, with the 4th best net rating of all time behind 2 Jordan Bulls teams.
Is that good?
In the first KD Steph team, which wasn't even a real team. There was a loophole in the CBA that allowed Durant to sign there. But anyway, I think the one thing that hasn't been said is everybody gives Brad Stevens a ton of credit for the roster, and deservingly so. But I think you also have to acknowledge with Stevens, and it's not just him in the front office, right? Austin Age, Dave Lewin, Mike Zarin, like all these guys did an outstanding job. It's a small front office, but it's an outstanding one. Is to do the cross-sport comparison now that we're going to be talking Pats is Brad is sort of Belichickian with how he handled last offseason. Think about who he traded. First of all, Robert Williams, to a lesser extent, is a beloved Celtic. Everybody loves Rob. Like, I know he's hurt a lot, but Rob was one of the main reasons their defense was so good in 2022. And he had like the 5th best plus minus in an NBA Finals that his team lost. I mean, the guy was incredible during that Finals coming back from the injury. But also Marcus Smart, right, who has been here, was the longest tenured member of the organization. And obviously, like, it looks easy, right? Where it's like, oh, yeah, well, it's Drew Holiday. Well, it's Kristaps Porzingis. But remember, they didn't have Drew. Like, Drew wasn't traded until after Marcus was sent away, right? So they got Drew after that. They were willing to get KP because they felt like, hey, we need to change how we're playing late in these games offensively. Everybody's switching against us. We need a guy that they can't switch off. Like we saw it in the first game against Miami this year. It's like, well, Bam can't switch off 7'3" Kristaps because then you're going to put a small guy on him. He's just going to shoot over him, right? And for Brad to do that, to a guy that he coached, think about this, Callahan. He coached Marcus Smart his entire career until he decided to go into the front office. I think back to you can go through a bunch of examples, right? The Lawyer Malloys of the world, the Richard Seymours of the world, where he felt like Bill felt, hey, whether it's money-wise, whether it's just on the field stuff. I mean, Logan Mankins doesn't have a Super Bowl ring, and he's traded before the 14th season, right? And Brad willing to, like, would Danny Ainge have done it? I don't know. Like, Danny Ainge is a great GM. I don't know if he would have made that move for Porzingis, trading away Marcus Smart. So I think that is sort of an underrated part of Brad, is that he's an unbelievable competitor, right? We think about this nice guy from Indiana, but that is ruthless, right? And obviously he did it for the right reasons, but I got to give Brad a ton of credit just for, I think it's underrated, like what a great competitor he is.
I think that's exceptionally well put. And I would add this, Brad hasn't made a first round pick yet. Like he knows what he wants, and it's easy to take the first round picks. I will draft and develop. I know the college game, and I obviously coach and what it takes to development, because that's what his teams were built on, right? The first couple of years with him coaching with the Celtics, he's doing this without, aside from a star player, and obviously they have a couple, the most valuable asset generally in sports. Rookie, cost control, rookie contracts. You hit on these picks, you get immediate value for however long. Obviously, the Celtics are a mature team now. They don't need those picks, but he's done it in a way that they haven't completely sacrificed their future anyway. I will just add this. Luka got his numbers, but the defense that Sam Hauser played, and the numbers are not good. You look them up and don't snort them as we just did with Brian a minute ago. Like, they're not good, but he is in position every bit the seventh man that you need in a series like that, and was legit switching onto bigger guys, onto Luka in the right place, right time. It's just he's a superstar. He's going to make it. But Sam Hauser made enough shots at the other end, including this no-dip three caught at his face and then flung like a volleyball set from the corner into the basket in game one. That dude's legit. 3 years ago, undrafted, unwanted rookie. As good as the Celtics have been signing stars, they're still able to mine and develop some talent. And Sam Hauser, again, does not deserve a whole separate story or piece about it, but was just rock solid in a way that they needed him. So,
and he chose the Celtics over Miami.
Yes. Where the Celtics are now flying back from after partying in the face of every Heat fan who might be down on South Beach at Live or whatever club that they're at. And that's it. Okay, last thing. How much longer are the Celtics going to be the best team in Boston?
So in your question, you had 2 to 3 years, 4 to 5 years. I think it's the 4 to 5 year window, because Tatum next year will be his 26-year-old season. Jalen, it'll be his 28-year-old season. Derek White, still prime, entering his 30-year-old season. He's going to get extended. So those are your top 3 players for the future. Obviously, we can argue now, Drew and Porzingis, both those guys are extended as well. And so you have a top 5 player in Tatum. You have a top 15 player in Jaylen Brown. The new Ringer rankings are out. Jaylen Brown hops into number 15 after being in the mid-20s before the postseason. And I would argue Derek White's a top 30 player with all that he does for this team. Plus, Drew, at least for 2 more years, I think is going to be at a pretty high level. And then I think about the Bruins. They need more scoring. They need better younger players, right? Like, I love Mason Lohrei, but I'm talking about the scoring. We saw the difference between them and a team like the Panthers, who's playing for the Cup right now. The Sox, there's a lot in the pipeline in terms of their prospects, but I don't know how much longer Cora and Bailey are going to be here. And the only reason I say that is because Cora is a free agent after the season. And I think I don't trust ownership to get it correct in terms of this thing going forward. They're not the same ownership group that won 4 World Series. I mean, they are by name, but they don't act the same way they used to. And then with the Patriots, I feel like this is awesome that they now have Drake Maye, but still questions, and I'm sure we'll get into some of them with the roster, and we'll see how quickly they can put a legitimate contender around Maye. And that's assuming that Maye turns into the guy that we all hope he turns into. The one thing I will say is, like, I'm so happy they have Drake Maye, because I can't believe the Daniels thing. I just, the more and more I think about it, I can't believe that Daniels went over Maye. And I know we talked about it a lot, like, throughout the whole draft process, but you know what I compare it to is, like, okay, Jason Tatum going 3rd to the Celtics after the trade, where it's, okay, you can see the prototype, right? 6'8", 6'9", 6'10" wing can lead your team and be the best player on a championship team, which, oh, by the way, he just did. But the LeBrons of the world, not comparing him, but Durant, right? Kawhi Leonard, that prototype. And I look at Drake Maye, I'm not comparing the players, but Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, Herbert, these big athletic guys, you know what I mean? With the huge arms that can throw on the run. And I think about Daniels, and I'm like, there's only one comparison, right? It's Lamar. Like, he basically has to be Lamar for him to be great. I think about sort of like Lonzo going before Tatum. There's only, at the time when Lonzo was coming out, he couldn't shoot. He improved, obviously. But there's one example of, like, a point guard that couldn't shoot that was the best player on a team that made it to the NBA Finals in recent NBA history, and that was Jason Kidd. Like, so it just felt like the May pick made way more sense to me. But anyway, I'm on a complete digression after going through the teams. But I'll say at least 5 years based on the age of Tatum, Brown, and White.
At least 5. So first of all, I agree with you. I think it'll be longer than 3 years. And then you might have some very, very small margins, right? But you think about a 64-win team. You said it, 4th best point differential in NBA history. Now you've got another year together. Obviously, Al will probably retire after next year, maybe the year after. You're going to need to deepen out that bench. They're going straight into, luxury tax, hell, second apron stuff. No detours, easy pass, straight down there. And they'll figure it out, which also shout out Wick Grousbeck for spending money, committing to it. And look, they're not actually getting paid in parades. This is an asset that does not depreciate. The NBA just got a new TV deal. He's doing fine financially, but there are other owners, as we know, not as willing to spend money in New England, and we'll leave that there. Summer is here, and you don't have to go to the pool or the park or your brothers or your sisters or your cousins or your grandmas or your buddies to have any kind of fun. You just have to hop on Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you have to do is pick more or less on each of 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Just like me, Prize Picks sponsors this podcast, Bats Interference, a couple of months ago. I downloaded the app, see what it's all about. The Red Sox have just started. Oh, I think Jarren Duran's going to get over a hit. I think Jason Tatum's going to score more than 25 points. Both of them hit, and just like me, you can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as few as 4 correct picks, meaning you turn $10 into 1,000. And so just like me, look at the Red Sox, other MLB games, even the WNBA, Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Breanna Stewart, Asia Wilson. Pick more, less, whatever it is, whether it's in Massachusetts, Connecticut, or other states, California, Texas, and Georgia. Prize Picks is available. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. On the Patriots, look, I think there is a pathway in maybe 3 to 4 years where they do get back on track. You're talking about them as Super Bowl sleeper contender. But what it will take between now and then are players like we're about to discuss. We have 4 forgotten Patriots. And this is to steal from my guy, your guy, my colleague, Doug Hyde, who used to do the series at Nesson right after the season. Hey, don't forget about these players on the roster. But these players have to just come out of nowhere and exceed expectations. And they could be undrafted. They could be 7th-round picks. They could be trades. But the point here is, as far as our criteria goes, this upcoming season, they could swing a game or 2, which in turn could swing the season. Because those are the stakes, really, when you're projected to win 4 or 5 games, as the Patriots are in virtually every sports book. Now, the rules are, can't be a quarterback, can't be a receiver, can't be Matt Judon, Christian Gonzalez, Christian Barmore, any other top defender, because these people are not forgotten. Everyone else, though, on this kind of roster, go nuts. So your top forgotten Patriot who could swing a game or 2, or maybe 2 or 3, and therefore the season is who?
Okay, so before I start, I want to say I didn't include Ramondre in this because I figured he was part of that top tier group. Okay. All right, so number 1 on my list, Josh Uche. Okay. So if you go to last season, the Patriots were 27th in sacks with 36, tied for 3rd 2 years ago at 54. So who was missing last year? Matthew Judon. So the numbers went from 11.5 sacks down to 3 for Uche. But you look at it, so 2 years ago, he's 10th in pass rush win rate, PFF stat rather. He was at 84th last year. If you look at just pass rush grade from PFF, not saying it's the be all end all, but he went from 11th to 68th. Okay. So clearly he was helped out by Matthew Judon being on the other side and getting a lot of the attention, right? So I thought about putting Keon White in here, and I know he had this great offseason, and I still love that Keon White pick because Callahan, I think that, he switched over positions at the collegiate level, right? So he's still new to that position. But I just went with Uche because I've seen it before, and he's playing for another contract. I'm still surprised that they got him at the number they did, although I got to imagine there wasn't a huge sort of market for him based on he's really a one-trick pony in terms of being a pass rusher. He's not going to be great against the run. And a lot of this is going to be dictated about situational, right? Like how many times are the Patriots going to have the opponent in an obvious pass rushing situation based on some of the issues they may have offensively. But I think Uche could have a bounce back year. Like, is it crazy to say that Uche could get back to having I don't know, what if it's an 8 or a 9 sack season? That could change a game at the end. If you have a lead and you have Judon and Uche on the field together, we could come up with a couple of clutch, not even just like some hurries or just a situation where he forces the quarterback to maybe throw an interception because he's pressured. So I think Uche is a guy that could help this, where I really like the defense to begin with, but I think he's a guy that could factor in a major way now that Judon's back.
Yeah, I think it's a fair pick. I think because he came up in the system, had that great 2022 season statistically, right? Like if you really go through it, he cleaned up against O-line corpses of Arizona, the Colts, and inflated that total a little bit. But even his per snap numbers, ESPN pass rush win rate, PFF stuff, watching with your eye test, like he's got to get off that you can't teach. And more often than not, relative to the other edge rushers, he's productive. That dip last year, Judon definitely a part of it. I am curious how differently they might utilize him now with Marcus Covington as a defensive coordinator. Does it mean better or worse? But he's a guy, Covington, who's worked hands-on with Uche, as did, Steve Belichick now is gone. But that pass rush group was very close together. So maybe there were things that Covington said, hey, I want to do it this way. Let's have him loop more in the inside. Let's have him hover over the A-gap and bounce back up because he's athletic enough to play in space. So I think people remember him. The part they forget, though, is the contract, which you mentioned, 1 year, $3 million. So if Uche does have a year like 2022, that's a type of value that you're squeezing out, right? Your performance over your expectation. For his expectation, $3 million, that dude could be a healthy scratch a couple times and still play well enough or produce enough to validate that contract. Let's do with defense. Staying in the defensive line, Armon Watts, who signed a similar contract, journeyman defensive tackle last year with Pittsburgh, before that Minnesota. He is 300-pounder, 6'5", solid, unspectacular. But last year at a pressure rate of 10.7%, which is very, very, very good. He's played similarly in a system as far as bouncing around the defensive line, one technique to a 3, sometimes kicked out to a 5, basically shading over the center, shading over the guard, straight up on the offensive tackle. And his best season, though, came 3 years ago in Minnesota when he had 33 pressures, 5 sacks, and 6 QB hits. And you go, okay, what happened that season? And I asked him this straight up after he signed. He goes, well, it's pretty easy when you got like Daniil Hunter and 2 other dudes that everyone else is really worried about, Minnesota, because then I can just eat one-on-one. Well, when I look at this defensive line now around Armon Watts, who if he makes the team, will probably play 30 to 40% of the snaps, Matt Judon is getting attention. Christian Barmore's getting extra attention. Josh Uche, we assume, is going to get a little extra attention. That leaves a lot of room for Armon Watts, who can play across the line, and you're going to need someone like that to make 6 to 8 plays a year to not only just, validate the contract, but round out a pass rush where you've got tentpole players, and then you need someone to kind of fire through there to get that sack on third down against a team that can stop your best, but you need to win the one-on-ones elsewhere to really make a difference and pull off an upset somewhere in the season. I think he could do it.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, because it's kind of like the same theme as me, like the guys getting extra attention, right, when I talked about Judon. But with Barmore in there as well, I think Barmore may be their best defensive player, right? So he's going to get a lot of attention as well. Like if you had to predict, like after the 2024 season, who would you think is their best defensive player? Gonzalez, Barmore, Judon's getting a little bit, at least slightly long in the tooth. I could easily see it being Barmore.
It's a great question. You know what I think? And it's hard to say, right? Barmore's about to turn 25. The dude can still not rent a car in some states, and he is the second highest paid Patriot franchise history. But
probably bought a nice one, though.
Yeah, put it behind a Hyundai Sonata, and if it's not his, he might have some trouble. Look, I would. This cuts against things I've said all offseason, which is I just want to see Christian Gonzalez play a 5th game. I just think it's going to be him. And it's partly Judon, 4-time Pro Bowler, deserves all the respect, the money, and the adoration that he gets. But just being 32, going on 33. Barmore, I think, had a really good talk about eating against bad offensive lines. And he got double-teamed a lot and sometimes anchored well and held up against it. The Buffalo road game is a really good example of that. Gonzalez, though, could just do everything on his own, right? Eliminate a receiver at his best, because we saw it. How often does he get there? I don't know. But I think that sample was strong enough where I would lean towards Gonzalez. Who would you want it to be, though? If you got to make this pick yourself, like this of those 3 or somebody else is the best defender in this defense, who would you want it to be, knowing what it would mean for the rest of the unit?
Well, for selfish purposes, Barmore, because I think he's just very entertaining, like whenever he talks to the media. But for football reasons, I think Gonzalez, right? Because you think about this division and all and just the AFC in general. If you legitimately have, say, hypothetically, I don't think it's out of the question to say at the end of the season we're saying Gonzalez is a top 5 corner in the league. I mean, that's so important to have that type of guy. I mean, what type of defense at this point in 2024 doesn't have a top tier corner, right? You kind of need that position. And it just allows you to do so many different things, as we saw when Belichick always had, whether it be Ty Law. My favorite was the rent a year of Darrelle Revis, which was awesome, right? And Stephon Gilmore. Like, it just allows you to do so many different things.
All right, I'm going to go quickly with my second of 4. Do you have Marco Wilson on your list?
I don't.
Okay, forgotten Patriot here. So he played 1 game for the Patriots last year. Claimed off waivers in December from Arizona. He wears the number 22. That's basically it if you've been paying really, really close attention to Marco Wilson. When you go deeper, and he's part of this young corner group that I've said the last couple of weeks now, I think might be better than I've been giving them credit for. We talk about Gonzalez, Jonathan Jones is hanging around. Marcus Jones is going to come back from injury. And then, well, not only is it just Alex Austin, Marco Wilson was a 4th-round pick out of 2021. That year as a rookie out of Florida for the Cardinals, 2 forced fumbles. The next year makes the year 2 leap. 3 picks, 10 pass breakups, and another forced fumble. New coach comes in. New defensive system, okay? He nosedives statistically, and probably on tape too, because the Cardinals, who, look, had reason to tank, but didn't really, just cut him, wash their hands. And so this 6-foot, 190-pound corner who played outside and inside in college gets scooped up by the Patriots and plays 1 game and is having pass breakups in the spring. So again, he's not a guy that I would say pencil him in or starting at any point this year, but is a guy that you're forgetting about, plays a premium position, still young enough. He's only 25 to make an impact, where everyone was enthralled with Alex Austin last year before anyone knew who Alex Austin was. And now here comes the guy that I think is being somehow overshadowed by another 7th-round pick from last year, who's got the traits, the pedigree, and some statistical production that would indicate he can get back to that level in the right system with a little bit more time.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, I guess I don't think my cuts are deep enough, because I kind of went for guys that weren't stars on the team. I mean, that's a deeper cut than any of my cuts. So you want me to give you my next guy?
Yep.
So my next guy is somebody they signed in free agency, Antonio Gibson, just because the reason I picked him is because the Patriots they haven't had a James White type since, I don't know, James White. None of these other guys have worked, right? Whether it be Montgomery, whoever they've tried to fill that position, at least hypothetically, none of the guys have worked. And I go back to 2022. I remember at the time you wrote about it, how Ramondre was basically worn down at the end of the 2022 season, right? So I look at Gibson and I know there's fumbling issues there, but you look at him last season, 57 targets, the 16th most among running backs. And in this offense with Van Pelt, Ford last year, Jerome Ford, 14th most targets. And Gibson was 14th in yak per reception among running backs. And then a sneaky thing about him is he's really good after contact, 3.51 yards after contact, which was the 5th best margin in the NFL. So just the fact that you can keep Ramondre Stevenson healthy towards the end of the season, and maybe he can help you out in the passing game, where we know this team's going to have issues as it pertains to the offensive line. At least it appears on paper, unless something changes in the offseason or somebody just gets way better and actually knows how to play left tackle by the time the season starts, that having that outlet at the running back position could be impactful for this team. So I think it's twofold, not just helping out the quarterback, but also helping out Ramondre Stevenson. So we don't look at the end of 2024 the way we did it the end of 2022.
Gibson's a great call, not just because of the position that he plays, what he can do for Stevenson, but for a guy who's your, second best outside free agent that they signed. We've hardly talked about him or talked about him since. And the contract reflects someone who, it's true. All the things you just said, good pass protector, can handle the ball, big dude, after contact is strong, but has a fatal flaw. This is like dating someone who is the worst driver you've ever known and has gotten into, in the last year, 4 car accidents. So you're saying, okay, you can't drive us to the beach, but if you need to drop me off at the post office or drop something off, we can do that. All right, little spurts for you, because the Gibson has a fumbling problem. And that's really what this comes down to. I think he probably would have re-signed in Washington if he was still the 1,000-yard back that we saw either his rookie year or year 2. But the guy fumbles, and that's an issue. And you can work it and try to coach it. I would say, though, if you do let him just drive to the post office, the grocery store, not any drives longer than 30 minutes or over 150 carries, very effective player. complementary player. He's a rare pass catching power back you can trust at the goal line or on third down and flex out. Because as everyone, we were writing at the time, he was a receiver in college in Memphis. And that was part of the issue with his projection in the NFL. He's going to stick a receiver. He's going to be a running back. He's a running back. He's big. He's physical. And the last thing I'll say is this. His fit within the new scheme is perfect. He is a one-cut zone runner, and I wrote about him a couple weeks after he signed. Those are his best runs on tape when you go to PFF and separate the man block runs from the zone block runs. He is a one cut and go kind of guy. And that's what he's got. He doesn't have breakaway speed, even though it was 40, I think it was in the 4.4s. That's what the Patriots are going to run. It's going to help Ramondre. It's going to help Gibson. If the man can just abide by the rules of the road and hold on to the football.
He's got to talk to Tiki Barber. Remember Tiki had those problems early on and he started holding the ball like really weird. It was like, high and tight, but it was like all the way up near his
he was like choking himself with the football. Was, yeah.
Maybe I'll have a conversation with Tiki Barber.
All right, third on your list.
Okay, so these names are probably a little bit too big, but the reason I mentioned Hunter Henry just because they gave him a contract where I felt like, okay, maybe that's a little bit rich, but I think about the fact that I'm not comparing the players. Njoku last year had 882 yards, second on the Browns. He was second most targets, most receptions. Totally different players. Njoku was tied for first in yak per reception among tight ends. Hunter Henry was last in yak per reception among tight ends. And I know they brought in Hooper too, but as recently as 2021, this guy had 9 touchdowns, which was tied for first among tight ends. And when targeted, the passer rating was 5th. And we know he's not a blocker. So I have to imagine that the Patriots, when they decided to bring him back, because they didn't have to give him the extension, right? They didn't have to do that. I have to imagine they have plans for him in the offense. And I think about going back to how much he helped Mac Jones. Eventually, when Drake Maye takes over as the starting quarterback of this team, whenever that is, I know we're going to get into that in a little bit, that having a tight end that I think Hunter Henry is basically a solid player. He's not a great player. He's not an unbelievable athlete, but he's a solid player. And I feel like the past couple of years, like his performance hasn't been based on his own ability. I feel like it's been based on some of the issues they've had with the offensive play calling, with the offensive coaching staff in general. I mean, we can think back to the Patricia year. So I think he's been hurt more so. Like most players are dependent on the scheme and the players around them, right? And that's sort of who Hunter Henry is. But I think if you have a decent scheme, which I think the Patriots are going to have that. Obviously, there's some questions up front, but I think he can still be a solid player. It's not like the guy's 35 or 36 years old or he's old. I mean, he's still in his, I guess a little bit post-prime, but based on the position he plays, like I think he'd still be a very productive player for this team, and I think he can really help a young quarterback.
All solid points. I would add this. I think if you gave Hunter Henry truth serum, he would elaborate on the points that you just made about the offense holding him back. And now he is someone who was a captain last year, who on the record, and even speaking to me off the record, always accountable, responsible, team first guy. But they asked him to pass protect so much in 22 with the Matt Patricia, Joe Judge, just offensive coordinators, spectacular, that it depressed his numbers, career worst numbers for him. The first 2 weeks of last year, when Mac is still the version of Mac Jones that inspired hope for most of 2 years. He scored touchdowns, right? Like almost popped them back into Eagles against the Dolphins. Mac falls apart. So does the offensive production. And obviously his numbers go down. But even in the last game he played, I think he got hurt against Kansas City in December. He had like 7-8 catches in that game with Bailey Zappi. So he is a serviceable, above average tight end. And he does get lost in the shuffle a little bit. I omitted him from my list because I think he, is going to score touchdowns like he wins over the middle of the field. But I would say this. He could be as close to a single person barometer, a human barometer for the rest of this offense as anyone outside the quarterback position that we have, right? If he's getting the ball and scoring touchdowns, that means they're winning the middle of the field and they're completing drives. That's going to be the difference between them winning 3 or 4 games and surprising with 6 or 7.
Okay, so we still have 3 months left until football, right? Right. So we still have to wait 3 months to go to a big game, right? Wrong. You can go to the NBA Finals with Game Time, my favorite ticket app, because Game Time is making NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier to get. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off, and you can find killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guaranteed to watch the Celtics in the Finals with Game Time. I scroll through Game Time all the time, not even for big games like the finals. I'm going to go to the Red Sox, take the tee in, boom, have a beer outside, wait at 7:01 for a 7:05 first pitch. I'm in. I've got one of the best seats at the house, sometimes up to 60% off. And you can do this, customizing your spot, customizing your section, viewing your view from the seat in your section. And it could be last minute ticket deals, flash deals, zone deals, whatever you want. But in the meantime, get on down to Causeway, Game 1, Game 2, Game 5, hopefully not a Game 7, to watch the Celtics in the NBA Finals, where you can take the guesswork out of buying those finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, all you have to do is create a free account on the Game Time app and redeem code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today for last-minute tickets and the lowest price guaranteed.
Yeah, I'm with you. So I hope that we get to the point where that's the case, because that means that Drake Maye is probably playing really well at that particular point in time. If Hunter Henry's putting up numbers and he's making things happen over the middle of the field. So I really did like the signing when they made it back in 2021. I will say this though, I also liked the Jonnu Smith signing at the time. So
we all
I was 1 for 2 there.
Yeah. My last one is a rookie, which again, this is kind of splitting the difference between forgotten and just I know about him, but I don't really care about him. Layden Robinson, 4th round rookie guard at a Texas A&M. He had problems with penalties in college, better run blocker. Stats, PFF, not particularly kind to him, particularly in pass protection. But my thing is this, and the same point you made about Gibson impacting Stevenson. If he can start at right guard, and rookie tackles typically have a much more difficult time than rookie guards. If he can start at right guard, that lets Mike Onwenu stay at right tackle. One of your best players at a premium position, often one-on-one, stopping edge rushers from getting to the quarterback. If they don't feel good about Layden Robinson or anyone else, Nick Leverett, who might start at right guard, then they'll move Mike Onwenu in there and ask Hayden Wallace, who everyone listening to this podcast from me anywhere has gone, I'm a little skeptical of this career right tackle moving over to left tackle. And okay, right tackle for Hayden Wallace is better. But again, the history of rookies at either tackle position, even if you've been there for 4 years as he was at Penn State, not great. And so I would prefer to keep my best players at a premium position, but Mike Onwenu staying at right tackle because he moved around in OTAs and in minicamp is contingent on someone filling his old spot at right guard. And I think the place that they drafted him said Layden Robinson could be that guy, but we have to wait and see. He has to step up, or Nick Leverett does, because it looks like Sidy Sow is going to stay at left guard.
Still a lot of questions, man, with this offensive line and a lot of guys switching positions, which I don't know if that's the best thing when you're getting ready, when you just drafted a quarterback with the 3rd overall selection. I feel like I like a ton of the stuff that Elliott Wolf did. I actually really applauded him for saying, you know what? We have a good defense. We don't have to draft many defensive players, so they only drafted 1. Like, I give him a lot of credit for that. I really like that strategy. And look, he put a lot of resources into the receiver position, even though they didn't get him. They went after what they deemed a top-tier receiver. I think that the Ridley situation is actually going to be good for them in the long run because I don't think he's a legitimate bona fide number 1 guy, but at least he drafted 2 guys in the first 4 rounds when we're talking about the receiver position. It's kind of crazy that they didn't even go after one of these veterans that's unsigned now. Maybe they'll do it by the time training camp rolls around, but it's still crazy to me that as much as they've or at least improved the roster theoretically on paper, kind of a really important thing is the offensive line. And there's just so many questions with that group.
Yeah, not good. All right, who's the last player in your forgotten Patriots list?
My final one, so maybe this is too big of a name, but Jabril Peppers. The reason I said that is just because, first of all, I just wanted an excuse to talk about Peppers, but secondarily, like all this about Duggar in the offseason, is he going to get a contract? He had to tag it first. But you know that last year, I know you do, but Peppers ranked as PFF's 5th best safety. He was 10th in terms of his coverage grade. And I think people forget like how great this guy was as a collegiate player, where he came out and he's 94th percentile in the broad and 96 in the 40. He was up for the Heisman Trophy, and he just didn't have a great start to his career. And of course, then he has the injury. I mean, he was in the Saquon Barkley trade, which kind of tells you what type of dynamic player he was. And I think about
OBJ trade.
Odell Beckham Jr. That's what I meant. But you just think about what he did last year, he had his best NFL season. And you usually don't have that type of season at that age, right? You're sort of already established as an NFL player. And I give the Belichicks and, of course, Drake Maye and company a lot of credit for unlocking him. And I know you've talked about this before, like sort of like the positionless stuff. I think that's where he factors in. I mean, this guy plays all over the place, and he's a missile. I just love watching the guy play. And I think, everybody loves Duggar around here. I think Duggar's a little bit older than people anticipate based on when he was drafted. He was in college for a long time. But I think that, and I know that Duggar was asked to do different things, Peppers was the superior player last year. So I think we could see another huge Peppers season.
I think we could. I would be surprised if he surpasses what he did last year. Doesn't mean he can't get close, produce the same numbers. But to put into context the coverage grade, Jabril Peppers is not locking down opposing number one receivers. He's not even locking down tight ends. And that doesn't mean he's a bad player. It's just contextualizing, okay, is he really the 10th best coverage safety in the league? No. But what he did do was thrive within the assignments that the Patriots gave him. And when you contrast how he was used in Cleveland, you talk about that slow start, late first-round pick in Cleveland, not only just not winning any games, which is not an environment conducive to rookie development, he's playing free safety in Greg Williams' system where you don't even see him on the all-22 tape. That old Browns defense, if you remember, had the free safety 30 yards deep. This is all 21, and where's the other guy kind of film? So that's a position where, look, it's hard to play safety, period, but let alone when you're someone better suited to be closer to the box, maybe covering running backs, playing a little bit more zone. That's what he did last year. I'm sure they'll continue with that. He'll be a really, really good player, and they need him. And that's another example of, again, you want to be a different team, exceed expectations. Players like him on, I would say, a modest contract extension. He's in a contract year again, but got an extension 2 years ago, or re-signed, whatever it was. Just providing more value than you would expect for the contract.
Yeah, well, it's a good point, too, on the coverage grade, because it's like, okay, he's in a good place for him, right? Where you're not asking him to do too much. He's not overtaxed. And I would never compare these players because one of them is a 2-time champion and 6-time all-defensive player. But Drew Holiday, like in Milwaukee last year, he's overtaxed, right? As the number 2 option. He comes here, he's like the fifth option. I know that's not an apples-to-apples comparison, but doing more of what he's great at when we're talking about Peppers and doing less of what he's not as good at is sort of, and I know we're talking about a Patriots team that didn't win many games last year, but the defense was not the problem. He gets to play with all these really good defensive players. So I think it sort of highlights his skills, where I thought this is a great addition to the team. And I think that maybe to your point, he's not as good as he was last year in terms of the numbers, but I think he's still going to be a really impactful player on this team. And we'll see what they do with Marte Mapu as well, like what his role is going to be.
And the last point is this, because, I brought him up. I almost included him on my list, but I feel like I've talked about him a lot for someone who just might get cut by the end of August. If Peppers gets hurt, Jalen Hawkins is the next player up. And that's assuming Marte Mapu is healthy and effective at safety, and they might just go, screw it, we need you more linebacker. And I get that they rotate them through. A lot of these guys are second-level players for the most part, Peppers, Duggars, Mapu. But we'll have to see what Jalen Hawkins looks like, because he was cut middle of last year and played mostly special teams. And he's had years when he's played safety pretty well. He's more the free safety prototype, a little bit leaner, a little bit faster than those guys. But you just don't know what you have in your own system until you play. And if Peppers goes down, that's a question mark or an area where it's a team strength and then suddenly this feels a little more rickety than you'd expect. Okay, we've got 5 minutes, basically 5-6 minutes to get through 3 things. We will start with Drake Maye, because it just wouldn't be a Patriots podcast. We weren't talking about Drake Maye. And you and I might not talk on this podcast again for a couple months, because I'm going to go away for vacation. We'll do the training camp thing. Would you come to camp, by the way?
I want to get out there for at least a couple days this year.
Okay, we'll talk after the pod, and I will help make that happen, and we'll get you a credential, and you come on down. But Drake Maye, give me a couple reasons why he could start sooner than people think, and then reasons why I know in your heart you believe it will be later than we expect.
Okay, so I'll start with the obvious why he wouldn't start, and it's what I've been hinting at the whole time, is the personnel, where the offensive line is just not right, and there's this fear that, hey, we could ruin the quarterback, right? And I don't know if I technically believe in that, but I understand the argument. It's like if you can't protect the guy, you don't want to have a car situation. I'm not saying that Drake Maye wouldn't bounce back from all this stuff, but if you're that uneasy about your offensive line, then it's tough to start the rookie, especially considering you gave Jacoby Brissett the money for this reason. Like, the reason he has that is to make sure that Drake Maye is ready. So you're paying him the money. You might as well do that until Drake Maye is ready, or more importantly, the offensive line is ready for Drake Maye to play, right? I mean, I guess the only counter argument to be, well, is the offensive line going to be ready at any point this year for Drake Maye to play? But at least you find ways to make things work, right? But the way that he would start is, what if he's just way better? I mean, you've already seen him up close and personal. What if it's just like you're lying to the rest of the team? You're like, whoa, this guy, he's so much better than Jacoby Brissett already, right? Like, this guy is unbelievable. Look at him throwing on the run. Look at the velocity on his throws compared to everybody else on the roster. I mean, I can't believe I feel bad for Zappy being out with this group of quarterbacks right now. It's like, geez, I mean, it's going to be, at least with Mac, it's like, okay, we both got noodle arms. I mean, we can battle this situation out. But the other so the big one would be he's just way better. And you'd be lying to the team not to play him, right? You'd be saying, like, you have a better chance to win with him than Brissett. That would be the big thing to me. But just sort of, this is a conspiracy one. What if the owner has a say? And I know that he doesn't like to get involved in football stuff, right, with the old coach. But what about, we talked at the top of the pod about the Celtics. They're sort of a team in town right now. Everybody's talking about Tatum and Brown. What brings more interest than to start the guy, the new toy that you just took third overall in the draft, or Brissett to start the season? What's more compelling to the local fan base, especially considering, see the amount of national television games they have, Callahan? Not many. You want to get a little bit more intriguing? Maybe Drake Maye can do that. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of a push from the owner, who I think has had a very weird offseason to begin with.
And who better than store brand Jason Tatum, a.k.a. Drake Maye, to contend with the real Jason Tatum, the description that Drake gave himself when we first met him about what he's like in the basketball court. Oh, I'm just, a discount version of the best, one of the 5-6 best players in the world. Kid does not lack for confidence. And look, 21 years old, needs to lead a football team. That's the last thing you would want, is him to lack confidence. So we shall see. Yes, I would say two things need to happen for Drake Maye to start. We are not going to know about them. The Patriots are not going to know about them for at least 2 months. One, how does he look, right? The decisions he's making, his answers under pressure, the playmaking, is it there, or is it going to take a while to come back, given, he could obviously do it in college, but there's a time and a place. And with the speed at which the NFL game is played, you need to adjust and, catch up to that time to know when to go crossbody, no look, and when to just make the simple check down. The second thing is they need to feel like they can protect him enough. The situation is stable. It's not perfect, but I would imagine if they have 2 question marks in the offensive line, we just won't see him. 1 question mark or hole in your offensive line, you can mitigate, right? Bootlegs, opposite, double teams, chips, keep a tight end in, quick game, whatever it is. But 2 is like fighting a 2-front war. And I just don't think that's going to happen because something Devin McCourty said on this podcast a couple months ago after visiting with Gerard, and just said they want to keep it stable. I think that's the right approach, patient one. So you and I are in agreement there. Okay, last thing you wanted to get to was the Brady retirement ceremony, which next week or the week after, we're going to have Nick Fitzy-Stevens on, your friend and mine. He emceed the pre-portion of it. He's got behind-the-scenes stories, and then he and I are going to do this scrimmage draft that apparently me, MailFan friend Gary loves to do in Fitzy, and that's it. But we're going to do it. It's going to be a fun exercise, and that's it. So he will tell more about that. But you had this great point of, hey, what if it was tonight? 6:19 or 6:20-24, not 6:12-24, because the finals are over. Boston is riding this new high. I'm with you. I just think they got a little too married to the day. What say you?
Yeah, we all know the synergy, the 6 and the 12, right? But it's so it was so well done. And Fitzy did a great job. I watched a lot of the red carpet stuff. It was so well done. It was so cool what they did. They had like the position groups come up, like the quarterbacks, and then you had the pass catchers. You had some of the great defensive. It was so awesome. And then the Celtics game started. And I didn't get to see Brady and Belichick's speeches until the next day. And guess what? They were both awesome. Brady's speech was unbelievable. And he said, it's not me, it's not you, it's us. If I had had a couple of cocktails in me, I may have cried watching that thing, hearing Brady and talk about
saying this now.
I know. Right? It was unbelievable. So, and by the way, we knew in the NBA Finals we're going back to last year. Do the Patriots not pay attention to the sports books? The Celtics were the favorites. So I just felt like I understand the synergy, but it was a Wednesday night, Callahan. Okay, it's a Wednesday. Why is it so important to do it on that day? I just felt like, I don't know, maybe this is me just selfishly overreacting, but I would have liked to watch the Brady and Belichick thing after the NBA Finals, already on this championship high, and be like, oh yeah, let's remember that time too. So I I don't know. I hated the fact that it was during the NBA Finals and specifically on a game day, even if you could have done it between days.
Yeah. I just raised the possibility of doing it tonight as we record. Tonight would have been game 6 if the series extended, and I thought Celtics Mavs would go game 6. If it was the Nuggets, I guarantee you they would still be playing in Denver tonight, however the series looked, whether the Celtics would have been up or down. I will tell you, too, when I was in Dallas, it was before game 3, and their ceremony was going on. A couple people within the Celtics asked me, like, hey, so what was up with your friends over at the Patriots? Why was it tonight? And I said, one of two things. One of which they don't care, right? What anyone else is going. They go, we're still the Patriots in this sense. It's Brady, it's Belichick, an event that will bring all of them in. It's a rock show, or not a rock show, but it's a concert with Jay-Z and Kenny Chesney. Bill Burr's doing the opening. Like, it's a full-on production. There could be no more pull than something that's got comedy, it's got music, it's biggest stars in sports and arguably New England. And so screw this, even the Celtics in the finals. We're bigger than you. Number 2 would have been just the idea of 6-12-24 was something they fell so in love with that they could not pull themselves away from it whatsoever. So, look, it was full. My parents had a blast. I know Fitzy did a great job. I'm excited to hear more behind-the-scenes stuff in a couple of weeks on this podcast. But I'm with you. It would have been nice to watch that, too, myself in full. But, poor me, I was in Dallas. So, we have it very good up here, right? If we're picking and choosing between celebrating the greatest, arguably, American athlete or in team sports of all time versus watching another team go to a championship, just 5 years after our last year in Boston, and I get to wear a Celtics pullover on my Patriots podcast, we're doing okay.
Yeah, no, you're right. And we got to find out, like, I never knew that Peyton Manning and Tom Brady worked out together in like 2009. Yeah. I'm like, whoa, this is absolutely insane.
Kids, like, we'll kill you if you share this.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. They did it right too. I mean, you mentioned Jay-Z, which is awesome, and we know Brady's a big Jay-Z guy. I mean, the Kenny Chesney thing, I mean, it's not really 2008 anymore. Probably could have avoided that one, but I thought it was awesome, man. I thought it was really well done. So maybe I'm making a big deal about nothing.
Yeah. Brian, I have one more question, and then I have some notes, and then we're going to get out of here. You don't have any 24-year-old girlfriend news you want to share with us, do you?
No, I can't believe that's a thing, man.
Okay.
That's unbelievable.
Well, yeah, some of us could believe it if we might have known about it for a while, but it's not really our business. I don't work for TMZ. That's out in the world now. We'll leave that there. So, lastly, I had a story with going fishing with David Andrews. It's up on the BostonHerald.com right now. I've tweeted it out a bunch of times. Please read if you have a second. That's been in the works for weeks. You hear David in a way that he has never spoken before. And it's not because it was me. It wasn't because we were fishing, but the story's months in the works. I'm one of the few per year that I'm like, okay, that was good. I like this, what I wrote. So please go read. Coming up, we have another MailFan, Mike Clancy, our first international fan calling in from Ireland. I caught Mike, our friend of the podcast, at the end of a long workday. So shout out Mike for pushing through and answering my silly little questions. Spend 10 minutes on the pod. Lastly, if you want to join the podcast in these upcoming couple of weeks, donate to Boston Children's Hospital. I will tweet out the link. Show me a receipt. It could be $1. It could be $100. It could be $20. And then we will find a time to get you on this show, answer your mailbag question, and BS for 5 to 10 minutes. So that's it. Any final thoughts from you?
No, man, I'm just ready now. Like, we're getting ready for the parade on Friday, as you mentioned, and then I'm actually having a lot of fun right now. The Red Sox are rolling, so that's good. Hopefully they can keep it at least competitive until football season, because I really can't wait to watch Drake Maye. I can't remember, like, I haven't been this excited about the Patriots for a while. I was not this excited about Mac, and Mac had a really good rookie season, a lot better than I thought, but I haven't been this excited about the Patriots in a while, because I feel like, hey, there may actually be light at the end of the tunnel. And I say that as somebody that just watched the Patriots win in 2019. Like, it wasn't that long ago, right? But it feels like, hey, maybe they have their answer.
Yeah. Could be. Hope so. I would love to watch some fun offense, not explain to the people why it's still broken. Year 3. I think it's going to be a tough season, but look, this is not the time to get down or be negative. It's late June. It's a dead period. We'll have camp. I will get you credentials to camp. We will talk soon, and then we'll have you back in the pod in a couple months. All right?
All right, man.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so technically we are still in Dallas here recording Wednesday. This is the eve of Game 3. It's Tom Brady Day. But if you are listening now, we are going back in time because this is an episode for next week. I wanted to record now today, however, with Mike Clancy, our next guest from across the pond in Ireland, because I was just chatting with Mike off air. He not only donated to Boston Children's and DM'd me about it, I completely forgot until he followed up because the Patriots game in London was announced. He said, all right, Patriots in London. I said, hey, I owe you 5 to 10 minutes on the podcast. So Mike Clancy from Ireland is here as our latest MailFan. Welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. It's great.
You got it. So I asked you, same old deal. You come with the question. You get to answer it. Then I give you the response. We don't really have a question today, but we don't really need one because you're our first international guest. And so we can talk about how you got into the Patriots. And if we have a little bit more time, you are not as bummed about the Patriots missing out on Calvin Ridley as I know a bunch of folks were 2 months ago. So start with your fandom.
So obviously American football isn't massive in Ireland, but I remember the Super Bowl, the first one they played against the Giants was being broadcast on Irish TV, and kind of like, all right, like, don't know who I'll support here. And I heard there was a good bit of, a lot of the Americans didn't like the Patriots after the Spygate or whatever, so just kind of thought, like, Boston, New England are kind of linked with Ireland as well, so just kind of said I'd root for them. And I remember they put up the highlight as well of the Moss touchdown at the end of the regular season to go 16-0, I think, against the Giants as well. And just kind of from then just started following it properly, and obviously picked the right team after the run they went on then in the 2010s.
So you weren't just swept off your feet by Tom Brady, who, again, today, Tom Brady Day, was just not how handsome he was. I'll pick the quarterback. He's the best looking. He's got the most championships. This was a full team buy-in for you. Yeah,
I think he probably helps. But it was just, obviously at the time I barely knew who anyone was, like, and you weren't long finding out how good Tom was, and Randy Moss and a couple of the Welker as well. But it wasn't, the team kind of changed then over time, and then Edelman was my favourite player for years then, and hopefully Drake Maye will be the new favourite.
Yeah. Who do you like now as far as the team, and what have you grown to appreciate, watching all these years later? Because I just have to imagine this very, I would say, like, staccato type of game, right? It's play, there's a break, there's another play. It's not a flow sport. It's not rugby. It's not soccer. Like, who do you like now? And then what have you come to appreciate about it that you didn't in the first couple of years?
I guess the thing just in general about sports I like is that every play is so different, that there's so much in one play that goes on for 5 or 6 seconds. You can break down so many, every duel on the offensive line, every receiver has a route, and the quarterback has so many different decisions to make, and there's so many moving parts. And that even though there's a lot of stoppages in that, there's a lot, it's very tactical, and there's a lot of I don't know how to put it into words, but there's it's just a very intelligent game, I think. I guess player wise, Ramondre Stevenson's quite a favourite, just the way he's able to create so much out of nothing, and hopefully they get the contract done that you were talking about on the last pod. And then just, defensively then they're so strong as well. Gonzalez obviously looks like he's going to be a big player for the future. And just watching players like Duggar and Bentley and Peppers, they hit so hard as well. It's crazy, really.
Sounds like your closet could be just full of red, white, and blue jerseys like that. I think I got 8 players in there from you.
I've an Edelman one anyway. That's the most recent one I have, and then I just have the jumper and the t-shirt as well. So
good. Well, you mentioned Christian Gonzalez, and I dropped some notes earlier in this episode, or plan to, about the last minicamp practice happened today. That's over. Jonathan Jones, after practice, who's not really been participating, but obviously watching Christian Gonzalez, said he's going to be one of the best players in the league. So that's across positions. That's across everything: offense, defense, special teams. And so, again, I think we all want to see it. They fully believe it's going to happen, but not to mention just the jersey number. I think the 0 appeals. Are you a Celtics fan at all? Are you a Tatum guy? There's something a little cool about the 0.
There is, especially when it's a new thing to the NFL as well. Like he could lock that number down as something unique to him.
Right. Speaking of zeros, Calvin Ridley was wearing 0 at least last year with the Jaguars. I don't know what he's doing with the Titans besides counting his money with his wife, not girlfriend, down in Tennessee. You, again, are not as bummed about losing out on him. And we haven't talked about receivers in a long time. And, Calvin Ridley will come up, as DeAndre Hopkins did, if the Patriots, struggle at that position, right, at receiver, and he's succeeding elsewhere, obviously in Tennessee, opposite Hopkins, just like Hopkins did a year ago. But why are you already not bummed? Don't need to see how he does. This is just not. They're not going to regret this. Yeah,
I just think he's turning 30 by the end of this year. He played 17 games last season and barely reached 1,000 yards in an offense with an very established quarterback already. I just think the amount of money, obviously, if you can get him a bit cheaper and on a shorter contract, but when you're talking about nearly 100 million for that kind of a player, which I think was like 50 million guaranteed he gets, like he's going to be 33 or 34 by the end of that contract. And I think this year for the Patriots, it's not like, obviously they do need a number one wide receiver in the near future, but they don't need one exactly this year, because I wouldn't even play Drake Maye a whole lot. I think try and build for the following year and keep that cap space instead of a year from now saying, oh, well, we're stuck with this bad contract we don't need, along with Juju's that's still going and all that, when they could just save the money and then who knows, someone could pop up that they could trade for, or else maybe Polk is number one, or maybe they get another receiver, maybe they have a high pick next year and they'll probably have a top 10 pick and maybe a top 40 pick and get another wide receiver and get an offensive, get a left tackle. So like, I just think it's something that they could have regretted, whereas at the moment, I think I like the fact that they double dipped in the draft rather than paying crazy money in a small wide receiver market.
You are a rare breed, Mike Clancy, not because you are streaming in from Ireland after work and making time in the middle of the day on a Wednesday, but because you are a patient Patriots fan. And I will have to say, I appreciate that. Seeing it in my mentions and the YouTube comments isn't to say everyone wants everything right now. But I would get it. I even get it if they do, right? All the seasons that we just watched, especially in offense, give us the receivers, make it happen, just score some freaking points. But I think you make a lot of valid points there. So that's well done by you. Last question, we'll get you out of here. You, being 5 hours ahead, have to watch 1:00 games here on the East Coast at 6, 4:00 games at 9. And then if the Patriots, which are only doing this once, ever play at night, Thursday, Sunday, Monday, there's going to be a Saturday one, you would have to stay up until 1 a.m. to watch the kickoffs. Are you staying up for any of those games, Mike Clancy, out there in Ireland to watch at 1 a.m.?
I do sometimes, yeah. Probably.
Oh, good man.
I'm always like, I'll just watch the first quarter and that turns to the first half. And then if it's a tight game, then I just say, go on, I'll stay up for the rest of it. Obviously, it's ideal to like a 4:00 game and I can, it's 9 until midnight over here, which is fine. But yeah, I'm used to it. I haven't actually watched many of the Celtics games just because they're all kind of midweek ones as well. But yeah, that's the joys of it, I suppose.
Now, do you have a pint? What's the setup? What are you eating? Like we have, pretty standard stuff, here in the States as far as what you're eating at the game, what you're drinking. It's all very bland, like light beer. You have any Guinness? What's the setup?
Wouldn't have a Guinness because I'd be at home. So it's usually, I would drink Guinness in general, but only from a draft point. Mm-hmm. So usually just maybe cans of, I don't know, maybe Coors, probably similar to Bud Light or something.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, we might be able to grab one in London coming up in late October. You might be for that game. I don't know what we'll do for this podcast, but the other folks, across the sea that I know listen to this podcast want to meet up. Maybe we'll do that. And we will have a pint of Guinness because we will be out at a bar somewhere. We're not, the Pass Interference podcast does not meet up anywhere but a bar. So that's where we'll be.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. Mike, I appreciate the time. Thank you for the questions. And again, for the donations. If anyone else wants to be a MailFan, I know it's the dead of the off season. But these kids still need money at Boston Children's Hospital fighting cancer. Mike has done his part to support. If you can do the same, you can come on the podcast. We can talk about whatever. But in the meantime, thank you, Mike.
No matter. Thanks for having me, Andrew.